So I asked someone not long ago if they had a topic they'd like to hear about, and they said gratitude. So I thought I would talk about gratitude today, and there's quite a lot, of course, available around this topic, especially in terms of using gratitude as a practice, to deal with the grumpiness, maybe. Every situation could always be worse. So, and depending on where we put our attention, we can lift up the mind or bring it down. And to realize that we have that ability can be really helpful. And years ago, there was a monk who's a friend of mine who asked me to do gratitude practice together, and he wanted us to each find, I don't remember, 5 things or 10 things to be grateful for in a day and touch base on that. So we did that for a while. And it's, of course, interesting to observe ourselves and what it is that we find that we can be grateful for in any particular moment, in any particular day, in any particular challenge or time of enjoyment. And, really finding maybe some of the deeper aspects of gratitude, especially as we look at the suttas. So I want to share the screen and find, hopefully it's here, some notes. And
Gonna share.
Yeah, I will. So I thought I'd just share these notes with you, and because there are a number of suttas where gratitude comes up, and actually the Buddha talks about gratitude in a very, I want to say profound, important. He puts a lot of importance on it. And so, I kind of broke my notes into a couple of sections, and this is one where the Buddha talks about being a good person. And this is Anguttara Nikaya, the numerical discourses in the Book of Twos, number 32. Mendicants, I'll teach you the level of the untrue person and the level of the true person. And most of the time, this means like a person who's doing bad things is an untrue person, a person who is unenlightened at any level. A person who is a true person is someone who's practicing, is doing good things, is practicing virtue. And oftentimes it refers to someone who's, really on the path practicing for stream entry, or as a stream enterer, or something beyond that. But it's you can get the idea, like what trajectory are we on? And he says that the level of an untrue person is being ungrateful and thankless. For the wicked only know how to be ungrateful and thankless. This is the level of the untrue person, but the true person is grateful and thankful. And there are quite a few references to gratitude and thankfulness that I haven't included here, but here's another one where he says, when a foolish, incompetent, untrue person has 4 qualities, they keep themselves broken and damaged. Now remember that from the Buddhist perspective, we're changing all the time, and what we can be changing all the time, or we can be really holding in place the conditioning we already have. And to remember that everything that we might think is, oh, well, this is how I am, or this is me, that's not really the truth. That it's really just a collection of conditions that have come before. So we're conditioned what we think of as me. What I think of as me is really just a long series of many kinds of conditions that have caused this to be the way it is. Those good conditions, putting in, good effort, making changes into a positive direction, causes that kind of change. So regardless of how broken or damaged we might feel we are, we can move through that and develop the mind and awaken. And so there's this, if we have these 4 qualities, we keep ourselves broken and damaged. And when we do that, when we're putting in, more harm, more negative behaviors. So you can see there at the end of that paragraph, what are those 4 qualities? It's bad conduct by body, speech, and mind. So what we're saying, what we're doing, what we're thinking, and being ungrateful and thankless. It's like the Buddha puts gratitude right up there with, moral virtue. So there's something here about morality in gratitude. And so, this being blamed or criticized by sensible people or by wise people, this is what the Buddha wanted us to take a look at. Like, if we're doing things that the wise or the enlightened people could criticize, we have to pay attention to that and see how we want to change. Not worry, everybody gets criticized, but don't worry about criticism that comes from someone who also is floundering, basically, and not at that point of being wise yet. So a wise, competent, good person keeps themselves unbroken and undamaged. And like I said, I don't know if there's any of us who doesn't feel in some way damaged or broken. Considering, everything that probably that this mind stream that has been through, there's going to be that. But developing the safety, the beautiful aspects of the mind through practice, through our own conduct. This is how we keep ourselves unbroken and undamaged, healed, you might say. So they are blameless and beyond reproach by the wise, and they create much merit. And these are good conduct by way of body, speech, and mind, and being grateful and thankful. And this sutta on 2 kinds of people who are rare in the world: one who takes the initiative to help others, and one who is grateful and thankful. So do you think that's true? Are they rare in the world? I don't know. I think there are a lot of people like that around me. I'm grateful for that. But maybe that taking initiative to help others is really something to look at. That it's really like, it's great to jump on board when someone else is doing it. There's nothing wrong with that, but how many people really take the initiative? And then, do we have gratitude around all of the things that are possible to have gratitude for? Or I don't know, something to consider, I think. And then I found this one on absorption really interesting. Without giving up these 5 qualities of stinginess, of dwellings, families, material possessions. So when Buddha talks about, without giving up stinginess with dwellings, families, material possessions, praise, and lack of gratitude and thankfulness. without giving up those things, you can't enter and remain in jhana. You can't go have deep concentration. So when the Buddha talks about stinginess around dwellings, families, and material possessions and praise, he's talking mainly to monastics. And of course, it happens whether we're a lay or monastic, like we're really greedy for or selfish with our living space. Families for monastics, that's who's supporting you. So where we get our material support and material possessions and the praise that comes to us, if we're, like stingy, holding on to those things, and we lack gratitude and thankfulness, we can't really get concentrated. We can't really get still. But if we give up those 5 things and we become, so we give up a lack, so which means we have that gratefulness and great gratitude and thankfulness arising in us, and there's this willingness to give and share with the basics that come our way, or like not being stingy around praise. That suggests humility, and I think there is a lot of humility and gratitude. It's like when we feel maybe like we're not being treated fairly, or there's something we want more and maybe we're not getting it. And like think about work situations, for example. There might be a lack of gratitude for the job that we have when actually that's keeping us going. There might be a lack of gratitude for the manager who's not very skillful, and we can be very focused on the unskillful bits, and sometimes we have to look at that. It's not like it's wrong to know what's unskillful. We have to have that clarity, but then to also maybe turn our mind to, well, what is it that we can be grateful for about this person and grateful for about this situation? And then the mind softens, and humility is there, much more likely and much more fully. And then we have the mind can be ready to settle down and meditate. And then there are follow-on suttas, Anguttara 5 from 256 to 271, and it just substitutes, instead of the first absorption or first jhana, the second, the third, the fourth, and also the realizing of the fruit of stream entry. So stream entry, once returner, non-returner, and arahant. And none of this is available if we're not grateful. Now, that's pretty amazing. That's a high, gratitude is so high on the list. And just to kind of think about all that comes with it, and all that's lost to us if that's not there. I feel like there's a tendency in this culture, in America, for some people. Many people are grateful and very generous and humble, but there's also this element of individualism, and sometimes the attitude that, oh, I made it on my own, I did it all by myself. And many of you have heard me talk about this before. It's like, I don't think that that's possible. Actually, there's so much just even embedded in the culture that we rely on. We don't even think about driving on roads and having schools and libraries, and there's many layers of infrastructure that we've been, it was in the world we were born into. This, and yet if there's this attitude of, I made it all on my own, there's a lack of gratitude for all the ways in which people helped. And you start looking at the little bit bigger picture of how So much of the economy of this country was built on the slave trade, on slaves, the labor of people. And that all still happens in many ways. And how are we going to have the gratitude that's deserved, that's really appropriate for everyone's labor, for everyone's help, for everyone's patience, for everyone's endurance? Not in a way that we have to feel bad about anything, because, it's like samsara is such a mess. But to begin to, and I hear it in so many people when they check in, they identify the native people that were living on the land that we're using, and what happened there, and to have that appreciation for everyone who came before us, to have an appreciation for our families. So here's another little sutta in Anguttara 5, and I didn't copy it all in here, but I'll tell you this story anyway. The Buddha was in Vesali, and where the Lichavis live, and they were among themselves talking about the things that are precious and rare in the world. The manifestation of 5 gems is rare in the world. This is like, he said 500 Lichavis were there having this discussion. That just means a lot of people. And they were all guys. So they're thinking the elephant gem, the horse gem, the jewel gem, the woman gem, and the steward gem, like having a good wife, having a good steward, having jewels and horses and elephants. This is like, for them, the 5 rare things to achieve. And then there's a whole long sequence of, the Buddha coming and them wanting the Buddha to come and join them. And he asks, what have you been talking about? And they recount this whole thing. And then the Buddha says, intent on sensual pleasures, this is what you're talking about, But really, there are 5 other gems that are rare in the world. The manifestation of the Tathagata, an Arahant, a perfectly enlightened one, is rare in the world. So for a Buddha to arise in the world, that's rare. And then for a person who teaches the Dhamma and discipline proclaimed by the Tathagata, that's rare in the world. And when the Dhamma and discipline proclaimed by the Tathagata has been taught, for a person who understands it, that's rare in the world. And I hope you're recognizing yourself in this, because you're a part of this. When the Dhamma and discipline proclaimed by the Tathagata has been taught and understood, a person who actually practices in accordance with the Dhamma is rare in the world. And then the last one, a grateful and thankful person is rare in the world. So it's pretty high level here. That's up there with the miracle of teaching the Dhamma, of knowing the Dhamma, finding it the way the Buddha did, to teach it, to understand it, to practice it, to be grateful and thankful. So it's what I want to invite is a fresh exploration into gratitude, because, we all know, wasn't it Oprah, practicing gratitude, she popularized it, that is great. And it can help us not be depressed, and it can help us be, happier people. But there's something much deeper, I think, here in the mind that's grateful, allowing us to really develop spiritually and to be so much more encouraging. And then we also, this next part is about parents. There are a couple of suttas here that you might recognize. First, he talks about why people have children. I don't think it's quite the same now, but in those days, and even in my generation, it was still kind of like this. Why do people think about having children? Well, they say, well, since we looked after them, then they'll look after us, basically when we're old, and they'll work for us. I mean, this was a lot of the motivation in many situations, and I'm sure still is in places where it's hard to gain a livelihood. You need kids to help with the work. The family line will continue, and they'll take care of the inheritance, or when we pass away, they'll give offerings on our behalf. So those are the 5 reasons why parents want to have children. And then there's another long interlude in here that I left out. And then considering these reasons why people wish for a child. And then the Buddha says, therefore, good people are grateful and appreciative and support their mother and father, recalling how they helped them in the past. They do for their parents as their parents did for them in the past. I'm going to get to the caveats on this in a second. Following their advice, looking after those who raised them, continuing the family lineage, endowed with faith, accomplished in virtue, such a child is worthy of praise. So he's trying to help us, and under what we might call normal circumstances with parents, to take that seriously and remember what they've given us. I know for myself, my first real glimpse into what my mother in particular, but my father of course also, but my mother in particular did for me only came when I had my own child. I was like, oh my God, they had to do this. It was like so intense. And so it's like, but even whether we have children of our own or not, to take into account what a sacrifice it is. And even though these reasons seem so incredibly self-serving to have children, which, like I said, started to change. I know I didn't have those thoughts when I decided to have children. I really thought about bringing someone into the world that I could support and help. And, even if a person thinks, well, I need help with the work, or I need all these other things, they're still doing a lot to help that child grow and develop. So that's one side of it, just doing what we can to help our parents. But then of course we find ourselves in situations that don't quite fit this pattern that the Buddha is talking about. We can have situations where maybe we didn't have much contact with our birth parents, but maybe other people raised us, that we can, have the gratitude for the effort that they made. And we can also have gratitude for the effort that our parents made when they weren't very skillful. And that can range to obviously utter horrible neglect or abuse. And that's a whole process of working through that kind of set of conditions. And a lot of times the best way is to send blessings from afar, share merit for whatever we were given, and remember what we were given, even though there might have been a lot of things that were very unskillful due to the conditioning that people come in with, and the ignorance, the inability to dig ourselves out of that, or for them to dig themselves out of that. So it's like, a lot of times we read these suttas. It's important to, I think, see them with wisdom so that we pick them up in the right way, and not kind of land in a belief about these things being so absolute that we become averse to it. If we feel that coming into the mind, and look at from a more broad from a broader perspective, I would say. I don't know if I'm hitting any chords here, but you can tell me in a minute. And then, of course, there's this sutta that's quite famous about the Buddha saying that there are two people who cannot easily be repaid, your mother and your father. You would not have done enough to repay your mother or father, even if you were to carry your mother and father on your mother on one shoulder and your father on the other, and you lived like that for 100 years. And if you were to anoint, massage, bathe, and rub them, and even if they were to defecate and urinate right there, even if you were to establish your mother and father as the supreme monarchs with this great earth, of this great earth, so you could the rulers of the whole world, even if you did that, abounding in the 7 treasures, you'd still not have done enough to repay them. Why? Because parents are very helpful to their children. They raise them, nurture them, and show them the world. But then the punch, the real beauty of this sutta is the way the Buddha identifies the importance of changing ourselves for the better and helping others to change for the better. But you have done enough, more than enough, to repay them if you encourage, settle, and ground unfaithful parents in faith, unethical parents in ethical conduct, stingy parents in generosity, or ignorant parents in wisdom. So of course this too, it's not like you can just wave a magic wand, and a lot of times there's no opening for helping with any of this, but sometimes we can see ways that we can encourage this, and sometimes it really works. My son certainly changed my life by becoming a monk and sharing that with me. And sometimes, see what you can do. And don't feel bad if it's not what the conditions allow. And then the last thing I included here was the verse from the Mangala Sutta, having respect and being humble, being satisfied and grateful, listening to the Dhamma at the right time. This is a supreme blessing. And I like the way that gratitude and humility and respect come together, how the heart is softened when we turn our attention towards what we're grateful for, and listening to the Dhamma at the right time. It's a beautiful collection, so gratitude, you kind of like looking at that, kind of like I see sometimes like the whole tapestry of the Dhamma, you pull one thread and you kind of like little by little, you get it all. We see virtue involved in this. The gratitude is really a continuation of virtuous conduct. And gratitude is related to humility, to respect, to being satisfied. This is, I think, one of the reasons that it's so helpful in bringing us out of depression. It helps us to be more satisfied with what is here, what we have. And then listening to the Dhamma, that wisdom. So that's what I wanted to share. And I'd love to hear what you all think about this. All the various possible, yes, Mahesh.
So how do we put this into practice? You mentioned to remember what few things that we're grateful for, but in general, like how we put this into practice.
Yeah, how do you put it into practice? So I think one of the powerful ways to put this into practice, the first step, of course, is taking this in, how important it is to be grateful, how much there is something always in every situation that we can be grateful for. We can be grateful for the things that are good in the situation. We can be grateful for the things that went right. We can be, great, even though the maybe a much bigger portion of it is not right. We can be grateful for the parts that are good. whether it's virtue or it's someone being generous or stepping in to help, or whatever it is, maybe our own ability to see the problem. We can be grateful for that. We can be grateful that we're experiencing something with mindfulness instead of blindly experiencing it. We can be grateful that our mindfulness can help us hold our negative feelings instead of acting upon them. We can be grateful about what didn't go wrong. We can even be grateful about what went wrong, if that's something we can learn from. So it's like, first and foremost, seeing the importance of gratitude. And then once we know that, really using our mindfulness to notice when we're not grateful and learning how to turn the mind. It's really amazing, and I know you've experienced, I'm sure you've experienced this, when you have an attitude about something, maybe it's a person or a situation, and then you start to turn the mind and see more facets of it. You see more parts of it. We can start to see where we haven't been as skillful as we want to be. And this is something to be grateful for. We can be grateful when someone shows us what we're doing wrong. That's really one of the greatest gifts of community life, or being in relationship. If someone points out what we're doing wrong, if we really have the right attitude about it, then we'll have the humility to really look, and we'll be grateful for that input. It's hard to do because our, kind of oftentimes our conditioning and our sense of self-preservation and the ego wants to preserve itself. So it wants to prove that it's right. It doesn't want to admit that it's wrong, but that just gets us into deeper trouble. So then when we turn the mind and we see what we can be grateful for, and we can look at our own, the things that we want to work on and change without beating ourselves up and going on, that direction, holding it in balance, then we say and do things differently. With that gratitude, we can have a whole different attitude at work, at home. It's softer, it's more open, we're more available, we're more approachable. And it can be the start to having a healing in relationships. It can be a start to having a whole different kind of experience. Is that concrete enough?
Yeah. So how is it different from not wishing things to be different? Like, there's some instruction to not wish for things to be different. That is like being content and not wishing for things to be different. And that versus specifically cultivating gratitude.
Yeah.
How is it additionally? Yeah.
So the question, in case you can't hear, is how is this different? How is gratitude different from not wishing things to be different? And it's very related. That's why that in that last verse, being satisfied is right there with being grateful. But I think gratitude is more active. It's like when we turn our mind to being grateful for the things that are good, and being grateful even for the things that have been hard, because we can find the good in it, or find the good in ourselves to meet it. This is something that's really interesting about every tragedy that occurs. Every horrible thing that happens, there are also many, many instances of people stepping forward with the real goodness and courage and effort that they can make. And these are things to be grateful for. So when we have this gratitude, it feeds and supports the ability to be content, to be satisfied. It's like these things support each other. Yeah. Thank you, Mahesh. Anybody have any complaints about the gratitude talk? I would be grateful. We get into the details. You know, it's always the fine print that causes the trouble, right? The gnarly bits about life. Those are the real teachers.
What I was thinking about what you were saying about mothers and fathers and such. And for some people, it would be really difficult to, you know, somebody coming out of abuse or something. But you could be grateful for the fact that you were given life, like at the very base of it, like that you have the ability to grow and change and, you know, experience the good and everything because, you know, they brought life, they at least got together and brought you into existence.
Yeah.
So, you know, but as you practice gratitude for what your parents have done for you, even if they haven't been all the way there or whatever, if you find the good in what they've done, then that softens you up to be able to understand, oh, okay, yeah, they weren't the best at that. Maybe they weren't doing the best that they could at the time, right? But they're humans and that, you know, the
It
things
is what
happen,
it is.
and it comes from the long line or whatever. And but you can, it opens you up to be able to forgive them.
Yes.
And and you know, not be so like just wanting to push them away.
Yeah. So could you hear Karen? Yeah, good. Because I don't think I could repeat that as well as you did. And all of that's true. It's having the gratitude. I probably, you've maybe heard me say this before, but I was so impressed with my dad. You know, his parents were conditioned in a very stern, pretty dark religion, very sort of strict and harsh. His dad was. His mom was, I would say, fairly neglectful emotionally. But they took care of him. He learned, you know, I mean, it's in part the way things often were in the past. And when my grandfather lived to be very old, and my dad would go to the nursing home every day to shave him, make sure he had his sweater on, take care of him. And I said, Dad, you know, you're being so good. He said, my parents did the best they could, and I'm going to do the best I can to take care of them. And what you said, Karen, about maybe they weren't doing the best they could, this is kind of a discussion I've had over the years with different people in my life. I had a friend a long time ago who, you know, a little bit of a new agey character with a little, like, you know, flowers and rainbows kind of attitude. And they said, yeah, really, people are just doing the best they can. And I said, no, we're not. You know, at any moment I could be deciding to eat this piece of chocolate cake. I don't know why chocolate cake is always the example, but eat this piece of chocolate cake when I really shouldn't. And then I'm about to do it, and someone walks in the room and says, you know, you really shouldn't eat that. And then I don't. You know, like, when am I actually doing the best I can? And when am I like fudging it a little or whatever? But I know what he meant. You know, it was like, you, under the circumstances, the choices you make are the choices you make. So maybe it's better to say not that we're doing the best we can, but we did what we did, and others did what they did. And there were causes and conditions that made that the case. And we do have, as Bhikkhu Bodhi says, a modicum of will. Ajahn Brahm is almost hesitant to say there is free will. even though he constantly tells you to do better. But he said you got to put yourself in the places where you're getting the good conditioning. And that's true. We do need to do that. But there's some modicum of free will that we need to employ. Whether we do that to our fullest every time, no, probably not. But to really kind of keep encouraging each other. I just want someone to walk in and go, hey, better if you didn't do that. She does it. She's good. She helps me.
I was thinking that the other way, like you tell me, hey, don't do that. It's like, yeah,
We do it for each other,
Yeah.
So anyway, yeah, our parents did what they did. That's what I like about the Buddha. He doesn't say, we were bad from the get-go, we were good from the get-go. The conditions were what they were. The conditions are what they are.
It's like bringing acceptance to it.
Brings acceptance and truth. Instead of trying to categorize things all good, all bad, it brings this is the way it is. We find the good in it. We emphasize that, we help that to grow. Yes, Adrian, as we were talking about Luang Pasumito earlier, it seems right to post this book he wrote on gratitude. Hey, thank you. Yeah, thank you. Yes, Paula?
Yeah, I've heard about the gratitude journal that's often recommended that we keep. I think you mentioned once or several times about the Sri Lankans, how they have a gratitude journal and then it's read. Their family reads it to them maybe before they die or something.
I think it's a little bit different.
Okay.
Because the Sri Lankan practice, as I understand it, and maybe Sarada can help us know if it's true or not, but what I've heard is that there's often this practice of writing down the good things that you do.
Okay.
And the merit that you're, the offerings you make or the kind things that you do, the various kinds of good things that you do, and that gets read out when you're dying.
Okay.
Remind you of all the good you've done. So generosity and kindness have a relationship to gratitude, obviously. A gratitude journal, though, is more about the things you're grateful for.
Okay.
And so there is a relationship there. The ways of seeing our own good actions and remembering them so that we are encouraged, because the whole idea of when you're dying, you want to have the mind focused on the good, what you've done that's good. You want your own, those reflections that the Buddha recommends of, the Buddha, the Dhamma, the Sangha, your own virtue, your own generosity, and the devas. And when you think about the devas, it's about you, the qualities you have that are the same as the devas that got them to heaven realm. So you want to really have that in your mind. What am I doing that's good? What am I doing that's lifting this whole stream of consciousness up? And so there's a lot of gratitude involved in all that, and there's a lot of real appreciation and acceptance of ourselves. I think encouragement there. So there's a relationship for sure.
Okay, so in practice, because I'm kind of getting into journaling lately, and I started scribbling on an empty journal here, gratitude journal, and then I was writing what I'm grateful for, and then I wrote acts I've done to help others, what I appreciate, what I'm thankful for. But it seems like those are two different things. One's that what I have done to help others is more like a reflection journal, doesn't necessarily go in a gratitude journal. I don't mean to be picky, but I'm just trying to put this into a clear practice for myself.
Yeah.
to bring it up to mind more often.
Yeah. So you might run 2 journals,
Okay.
but it really depends on what helps you.
Uh-huh.
Whatever practice we pick up, then notice if it helps you.
Mhm.
And I mean, one of the things that we've talked about with you, and it can be true for any of us, the Buddha gave us so many different practice tips. I mean, it's just like so many different ways we can train, and it's important to use what we need, develop a certain amount of familiarity with these different practices and ways of doing things so that we know when to apply them. It's like having, the whole apothecary, the whole pharmacy, you've got all those medicines. Which one do you need for the particular issue that's coming, or what really works as an ongoing practice to help to calm the mind and lift up the mind and encourage our virtuous behaviors, encourage our purity of mind.
Yeah, I don't think recalling acts that I've done to help others, it doesn't always feel good to do that recalling of that. It's kind of, I think, our culture to like, oh no, that's just what I should be doing. So I don't quite know how to put that into practice. Being grateful and having a gratitude journal, like without that, is a little bit clearer to me.
Yeah, and that's part of, as you said, that's part of your conditioning. That's true for a lot of us. And I think a lot of these things are conditioned in us culturally. So, generosity, we were talking about generosity and how it shows up more or less in different cultures. And of course, things have changed so much because many years ago, we only really maybe knew the culture we're living in because there's no media taking us around the world and meeting people from different places. But now, and we were talking about Amaravati earlier, when I lived in Amaravati, I felt like I really got a lot more exposure to people from different cultures. So depending on our culture, we might feel more comfortable with generosity and be willing to really give. You look at the Vietnamese people, for example, incredibly generous. And it doesn't mean there aren't generous people in the West. There are. America is really a very generous country on the whole. But, it's like there's also that, I don't know, kind of many of the views we talk about, it can be hard to feel good about ourselves, or it can be hard to be generous with ourselves, or it can be hard to have gratitude for our own skill and ability, because there's some, underlying sense of our badness and an underlying sense of how we should feel bad about ourselves because that's the way you get better, something like that.
Mhm.
And that really is toxic.
Yep.
That very harsh religion I talked about that I grew up with.
Mhm.
So many people are in that kind of context can be incredibly harsh. It's like it goes together, and it doesn't really go together. Religion and harshness should not go together. But to try to sort that stuff out and see what areas of our conditioning are limiting us and pulling us away from the Dhamma, and what parts really bring us in line with what the Buddha taught.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Paula. Suzanne?
Thanks. First, I want to say there's a lot of gratitude for the advice from the Buddha last Saturday. Mine was on dwelling in feelings, and that's just been great. this is a question about karma and generous and gratitude. So a pretty disabling experience 11 years ago, maybe you guys hear it in my talking, has been what I call the worst physical thing that happened, but the best spiritual thing. And maybe I have no free will about what I've done, but it's really brought me back to practice. And some people would say, well, that's not karma. What happened to you? But I know you can't give a whole talk on karma, but I'm curious of what you want to say about gratitude for karma.
Well, karma is, there are kind of two aspects. There's karma is action. So it's the actions we take with intention. And then there's the result of that, which is called vipaka karma, what comes back to us as a result of those actions. And when things happen to us, it's interesting to kind of think about, what happens, because everything happens because of causes and conditions. So when the Buddha just constantly said, okay, what are the causes and conditions for death? Well, it's being born. It's not something you did that causes you to die, it's being born. So when we're born as a human being, which also comes from causes and conditions, but some people say, oh, I chose these parents, or I chose to be born, and there can be a very strong urge to want to live and to be born, to have a human body, to be able to do things and feel things, and all that comes with it. But it's still like once you're born in a human body, then you're subject to aging, you're subject to illness, and you're subject to death. You're definitely going to die. And so the illnesses that can come, they don't have to be because you did something to someone to cause them a problem. It's because you're a human being. You've got a body. And it's amazing, actually, I think, given the complexity of it, that it works at all, that it's not constantly breaking down. Well, it is constantly breaking down, and still somehow keeps going. So if something like that happens, I don't know what happened to you, if it's something that's really just like coming from health, okay, even if it's an accident, even if you're like in the wrong place at the wrong time, and a drunk driver drives off the road and kills you on the sidewalk or injures you or something, it's like, that doesn't mean you did something necessarily in the past to create that problem, to have that happen. Maybe not. But the best thing is to not look back around karma, but to look forward. I mean, the real teaching of karma, the benefit of understanding karma, is to think, what's the result likely to be for my actions right now? If I cheat someone, what's the result that could happen in the future? If I lie, what's going to be the result? If I tell the truth here, even though it's hard, what's likely to be the result? Maybe initially I get fired or something, but then later I'm happy about it. What's the result for the person who refuses to carry out the orders in a war and kill innocent people? It's like, we need to look at the long game. And so like trying to like figure out like, why did this happen to me, is pretty pointless. The main thing is to say, what can I do with this situation now? And like you said, whatever happened there, it brought you back to your practice. Hallelujah. That is the right thing. That is the best thing. And so when people try to talk about like, oh, I must have done something really bad to have this happen, or that person over there, they must have done something bad to be disabled or injured or ill or something, that's the wrong way to think. Really the wrong way to think. Causes and conditions are so many and so complex. The Buddha said, don't try to sort that out. Your head will explode. Literally said that. That's not the place to look. And it often causes people to be blaming someone for their own misfortune, like, and why do we do that? Why do we do that? Because we want to think, well, I didn't do what they did, and so I'm safe. That is a false assumption. We are not safe in samsara. You have a human bodies get damaged, human bodies fall apart, they disintegrate. There's nobody who's safe, no matter how good we are. So we want to be good because that's what we carry with us. We want to be good because we can be a beautiful force in the world. We can be a conduit for spiritual energy to come through and flow. And why not do that instead of looking at the past and whatever the heck happened before? And it just doesn't matter in a sense. What matters is what we do now.
Yeah, so thank you. It's about results. Thanks.
Yeah, and the choices we make. Neil?
Yeah, something that Paula said got me thinking when she was talking about a certain level of discomfort with thinking about your own generosity. And it occurred to me that when my sister called me a couple of weeks ago or a month ago or so and said, I'm going to have this operation and I'm really scared and I would like you to come and be with me. I was very surprised at my own initial thought. And I bet she expected me to like hem and haw and like, oh, I have my life here. Let me see if I can make it work. Da, 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 da. And I I just said, yeah, of course. And it took me by surprise. And I think there was a factor of, you know, there was a time where I would have had to come to the thought of, I need to do this because she's my sister, so there's an obligation. But I think this idea of taking stock of your own generosity actually breeds more pure generosity.
Yes.
As opposed to oh, I have to do this because I have to do this, which then makes you continue that cycle of being annoyed about having to be generous. Does that make any sense?
Makes total sense.
So,
Exactly.
so so I have to thank Paula for making her comment because it got me thinking that somehow this practice has made me come to a real understanding of generosity, or at least an acceptance that that generosity, I don't know. I'm not sure that I need to say much more than that. That generosity is okay.
I
That
think this is like the cherry on top of the whole session here, because it's like, yes, this practice of, bringing our attention to what we're grateful for, bringing our attention to how we've been generous and how other people have been generous to us, even, regardless of what their attitude has been, like what we've been given,
and
and
be grateful for our own generosity.
being grateful for our own generosity. And it's and that surprising yourself comes from the practice you've been doing. It's like we're conditioning the mind all the time. We're training the mind, even if we're not understanding that we're not intentionally, but whatever we're thinking about, whatever we're doing, we're training the mind. And then those pleasant surprises come about. And whatever water went under the bridge with our siblings or our parents or whatever, we have a strong karmic connection with them. You know her like probably nobody else. and she knows you, then you do care about each other. It's beautiful. Yeah. Second.
I wanted to share that recently I had, like you had shared about this journal that people keep about their generous acts,
Mhm.
and it is read out at the time of their death. And so I got an app which kind of, while I'm going through my phone, it'll randomly pop up a message. And so I thought, let me put in like any generous act I do, let me put it in. So it'll randomly pop up something generous I've done.
Hey, technology, go.
And actually, what I found is that, like when the day is going rough, or generally you're not feeling that great, and then you read something, oh yeah, I did something nice the other day. Maybe I'm not such a bad human being after all.
Yes.
And also now, for example, Neeta loves animals very much, and so we kind of put a little thing for the squirrels to come and eat, and the birds and all of that. And just sitting and watching them come and eat, and then just thinking, oh yeah, we did something which now they're enjoying.
Mhm.
I think both of us found a lot of kind of a pleasant, abiding kind of a feeling with that. So I
Yeah.
just thought to share, because in our culture also, in India, they say that neki kar darya mein dal, which means do good and then just don't even think you've done anything. That's what the conditioning there is.
Yes.
But we also found that, and it also like Neil was saying, kind of opened us up to the joy of giving more,
Mhm.
and looking out for opportunities to give more
Yes.
also.
Yes. It's interesting what you're saying about the conditioning to not think about what you did, to act like, okay, I'm anonymous and I just did it and then I don't think about it anymore. I think that's intended to be the remedy for puffing ourselves up or thinking that we, look at me, I did this great thing, or something we wanted from it that we, and actually this is so useful to be discerning around, because so many good intentions taken too far become inhibiting. And this is a very good example of that. Even our excellent coping mechanisms that got us through really tough times then have to be discarded because they're holding us back. And so it's like being aware enough about what's happening with the mind and seeing those good results and knowing that, yeah, if it crosses over into, hey, look at me, I'm so generous, it's like, okay, we're missing the humility part. We need to come back to, selflessness, anyway, that's a great example. Yeah, thank you.
Can I just add, I think the irony of looking at your generosity and sort of accepting it, the more you do that, the less you will be puffing yourself up about it.
Yeah.
Because it just becomes purer and purer and more natural.
Exactly. It's so true. And this is also true of awakening. So if anybody ever says, hey, I'm an arahant, or, like boasting about their achievements in the spiritual practice, oh, friend, you know what? You might have to take a couple steps back and start again, because humility grows with our wisdom and selflessness and the willingness to take a loss. I was talking about that last week, and that's we're getting ourselves out of the way, that all of these good qualities blossom more when that happens, and when we reflect upon these things in a good way, Yeah, it gets better.
Think it's good to reflect on why you're doing something that is generous.
Oh,
Are you
definitely.
expecting something back? Or are you doing this out of the goodness of your heart? Are you trying to use this as a way to get something you want? Or are you just doing this and then letting it go? And, you know,
But that
and
funny part
that's the
of
thing you write down.
letting it go, but remembering that you did something good.
Right.
And really
so,
rejoicing in it later
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
And-
like
and
for
not
that
really-
reason.
It's not real generosity if you're doing it for some self-serving purpose anyway. So.
Right, so
Yeah.
taking a look at why you're doing the things that you do and mindfulness around that is important.
And then taking it a step deeper, like, why do I want something back from this? There's a hurt part in there that needs to be addressed. And not to get too psychological about it, but this is all part of the practice. Peel that onion layer upon layer and see. When we get really down to the core of it, we don't have to prop ourselves up anymore. We don't have to try to make things be different. We just keep putting in good causes and conditions. Yeah, Carrie? You're muted.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, a number of times recently, people have said to me, Carrie, you're so generous. And I'm like, really? And so what I wanted to share is that I think that when we approach anything or anybody with a caring heart and a loving heart, that in itself is a great act of generosity that I think we're doing all the time. And we're probably not even aware of how much good we are offering simply by our willingness to offer good. So I just wanted to share that.
Yeah, it's true. Generosity comes in so many forms. Yeah, thank you, Carrie. I know I kept you after school, sorry. But we'll say goodbye. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, we'll be here in person next Saturday, but after that, we're going on retreat for a couple of weeks. And I don't know if anybody wants to do something about that while we're gone.
Yeah, we're going to be on retreat from what date to what date?
I think it's the 14th to the 26th.
We're going to be here on that Saturday, the 27th, I guess is a Saturday. We're going to have a day long here.